What is up, everybody? The Accurate Zach is back, bringing you another review. This time we're going to be talking about Ratchet & Clank, the 2016 reimagining of the original game. Hi, Luna. Are you here to talk about Ratchet & Clank too? Huh? Apparently, Luna's going to help me out here during this review. Ratchet & Clank 2016 is actually a game based on a movie based on the game. You follow me? I know it's very complicated, very complicated. Get some scientists on the phone to assist you with this Inception-like situation. I'm sure this has been thrown around a gajillion times since Ratchet & Clank came out, but their games are like Pixar movies that you can play. And I myself don't have a lot of experience with the series. In fact, the only other Ratchet & Clank game that I have played from start to finish was Ratchet & Clank All for One. Also, of course, developed by Insomniac Games. And the reason I enjoyed it so much and I liked it was a co-op game. And this was back when I first bought my PlayStation 3. All for One came with the PlayStation 3 that I bought on that Black Friday that year. So I took my copy over to my buddy Jesse's apartment, and my cat just fell out of her chair. Okay. And we had All for One. We played it together, start to finish. It was so much fun. It was insanely entertaining, hilarious. The back and forth between the characters was memorable, and we had a great time playing it. He, of course, was a veteran of the series, and that being my first. So let's move on to the topic at hand here. Ratchet & Clank released in 2016. All age groups can enjoy this game. It's very kid-friendly. It's adult-friendly. Overall, the combat, the gunplay is phenomenal. It's the best part about the game. And there's a lot of guns. There's a lot of options for the player to go through any map or any planet, get through any of the obstacles. Some of my favorite guns included the Pixelizer, which does exactly what the title implies. It pixelizes the enemies, and it even has a little retro sound, like you pew. You know, that's my impression of it. That after you fire it, it sends out this arc. It's like triangular almost, and it hits all enemies in a pretty wide array, and even wider as you upgrade it. And it literally pixelizes them. It turns them into retro versions of themselves temporarily. It stuns them, and you can pretty much just spam the gun and just perpetually keep these things as pixels until they eventually just shatter. As soon as I got that weapon, I used it the most. It got me out of a lot of jams. And then you get the buzz blades a little bit later, and those basically made me feel like a ninja Lombax. They fire fast. They were extremely effective against bosses. They looked cool. They had, pew, 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 just flying around everywhere. They were great. Then, of course, you have the Sheepinator, which turns enemies into sheep. It's so deliciously stupid, but it's absolutely enjoyable and kind of OP. Like, it worked on just about anything. And finally, the Groovatron. I'm not sure if the Groovatron was added in this Ratchet & Clank game. I don't remember it in All for One, but that was also several years ago. Oh, hi, you're back! You're back! I missed you so much! Oh, goodness gracious, look at you! Look at you! So the Gruffatron, you throw it out there, and within its gravitational pull, you force enemies to dance. And while they're dancing, they take extra damage from your other weapons. Yeah. It's so dumb, but it's charming and endearing, and I used it on everything. At least I tried to. It even works on bosses. You know, you throw this out there, and then this big gargantuan man-eating, Lombax-eating, reptilian Godzilla thing just starts grooving around, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Weapon upgrade system was pretty neat. You collected Pyrosite, I think. Yeah, we'll go with that. As you collected them, you got like these web of upgrades, and if you circle around the question marks, you got some extra super upgrade. Ooh. I mean, it wasn't bad. I honestly think you could probably finish the game without even upgrading anything. I mean, why would you do that unless you're the masochist, which I know a lot of you are. Tried to max out my favorites before I even dipped into some of the other guns that I barely use. And, towards the end of the game, you get a lot of the upgrade material, so I kind of spread the love a little bit. But it was enjoyable. It was enjoyable. I liked it. Very basic, but effective. The enemy variety throughout the game was pretty solid. I mean, you had your typical derp enemies. They weren't much of a threat. Then they started to get better weaponry. You started to see a lot of Warbots and different variations. Oh my god, Kitty! Kitty, what are you doing? I'm being sieged! Okay, no. So yeah, Warbots. There's a lot of variations of those. They were generally some of the most intimidating enemies due to their weaponry. There was one planet where you had to face basically floating alien brains, and Those are pretty great, intimidating. They even had health bars, and if the enemy has health bars, you know they mean business. There were simple, like, blob creatures. They were silly and pretty worthless. I just lit them on fire and moved on. There are a few bosses scattered throughout the game. There honestly was, there weren't that many. I think maybe 4 total. You had the big Godzilla guy. You fought Captain Cork at some point. You had Dr. Nefarious at the end. They weren't particularly difficult. I hated Mrs. Zircon, which, speaking of Mrs. Zircon, let me talk about Mr. Zircon real quick. He's another weapon. You hit the button, a little robot guy with a big jaw, teethy jaw comes out and he starts shooting at you. He has really funny lines, but after he repeats each one for like the bagajillionth time, I never wanted to use him again. If he wasn't so useful, I would have stopped. Anyway, his mother, Mrs. Zircon, I did not like that boss. I ended up cheesing it. If you just fly above her at a certain angle, none of her attacks can hit you, and I just kind of hung up there and blast down and lit her on fire. As do most 3D platforming games, it did have some collectathon aspects to it. You could collect trading cards, which unlocked certain abilities when you completed a set. You could collect little bolt guys, I don't know. I think, yeah, they were bolt screws, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Those are usually placed in out-of-the-way locations or secrety locations, and I didn't really care too much about them, to be honest. I mean, if I saw one, I would try to get it, and if there's an area that I thought there might be one, I'd go after it. But I don't know, that stuff doesn't really interest me. They unlock certain cheats and perks in your menu when you get, but I don't care. The game didn't really drive me to be a completionist, so I just kind of hand-waved it away, not a big deal. One aspect of the gameplay that I don't think they implemented enough was the Star Fox-esque aerial battles. Ratchet and Clank hop into the little starfighter. They generally use it for fast travel, going from planet to planet as you unlock them. But there are some instances where you actually get in it and it becomes a battle. Those fights are very pretty. They're very fun. You hear character dialogue, like, oh, hey, help, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I would have loved to see more of that. I almost wish Insomniac would just make an entire Ratchet and Clank game based around that, because let me tell you, the world is starved for good aerial combat. I ache for a good Star Fox game, but they haven't been good since the GameCube. But I can't put that responsibility on Ratchet and Clank and Insomniac games as much as I would like to. I really enjoyed the segments that did do it. I kept waiting and wanting more. There are hoverboard races, which were marginally enjoyable at best. They weren't bad. I didn't do any of the ones that the game didn't force me to do to progress the story along. And then one aspect of the game that it stops the momentum dead is when you take control of Clank on his own. They're little puzzle sections. They're very rudimentary and boring, but it stops the momentum dead. It's like, oh, I was just shooting a bunch of stuff and flying, and now let's slow it way down and solve some puzzles that are just so obvious that my brain doesn't even have to start turning the wheels. I can just zombie it and do fine. All in all, the gameplay loop was extremely enjoyable. The core, the meat, the big old meat. Oh my god, kid. The meat of the gameplay, the gunplay was extremely satisfying, and I loved pretty much every second of it. Every wave of enemies, I kept saying, come on, bring more, I want more of you. The game gives enough ammo. Nope. Okay, get out of here. Story-wise, let's talk about the story. I mean, I don't really want to talk about it too much, honestly, because it's just pretty, it's your baseline for entertaining. It has your opening, it has some climaxes, it has an all is lost moment, and it has the redemption arc. It's really basic, it's very cookie cutter, it's fairly entertaining. For me, it was more of just a bridge to get me into shoot. Come on, Luna, come on now. Perhaps the most disappointing aspect of the game for me overall was the complete lack of back and forth between Ratchet and Clank. In All for One, the characters were constantly quipping back and forth at each other. It was very funny and it was very charming. There was barely any of it. It's a crying shame, it really is. I mean, the game's called Ratchet and Clank, but aside from cutscenes and such, they were hardly even present. There are some genuinely funny moments in the dialogue, but it honestly was few and far between. A couple meta moments that were very funny, but overall, a step down from what I remember in All for One. All for One was giggly and funny pretty much throughout, and this, I just kind of stopped caring about what anybody had to say and just wanted to keep shooting stuff. I know that's very Oonga Boonga Caveman, but I'm I'm taking what the game gives me, and some of it I just kind of wanted to throw back, give it back, and just give me more guns. Captain Cork's narration, however, was probably the most humorous part of the game. Ratchet's underwater for too long. You know, he'll say things about, oh, well, Ratchet soon realizes he cannot breathe underwater. You know, stuff like that. Captain Cork was very funny. The narration I would not trade for anything. At this point in time, I can't even remember any names of the other characters in the game besides Skid McMarks and Dr. Nefarious. Nefarious, say the words. Soundtrack-wise, this one's weird. I usually try to keep a good ear to the ground. I try to really absorb a game's soundtrack so I can have educated things to say about it, but nothing really stuck with me from the game. It was very heroic, tonally appropriate at all times, but there weren't any tracks at the end of the game that I'm like, wow, I actually would like the soundtrack of this game so I can listen to it on my own time. That's not really the case here. I mean, again, it felt very Pixar movie with the music, and again, musics in those movies usually kind of just blend into the story, and they didn't necessarily prop up the game, and just sort of kept it consistent and kept it on beat. Voice acting was really good, even if there was way too little of it. Like, come on, guys, give your voice actors some more stuff to do. Pay them. Pay those people. Honestly, the highlight of the sound design was probably the sound effects on all of your weaponry. I mean, each of it, you knew what weapon you had in your hands based on the sound it makes. I mean, they're very, very varied and unique, and I enjoyed that. You know, I appreciate that. Graphically, the game's very pretty and crisp. I like the art design. A callback yet again to Pixar. Like, you could have fooled me and said that some of those guys that work at Pixar were involved in the animation process for this game. Each planet you visit has its own personality. Some stuck out more than others. For example, I really enjoyed Poketaru, partially because that is one of the planets that you take control and have some aerial battles, but also it was very pretty. There's a lot of blues, waterfalls. It was the resort. There was a big resort on the island, and it stuck out as probably my favorite planet in the game, and I wish I could have spent some more time there. Another planet that stuck out to me was Calibo. I'm not too sure, but it felt massive. It had this huge grind rail section of it that was kind of difficult for one particular. I got lost on it. Like, how do you get lost on a grind rail? I don't know, but I managed to do it. The grind rail was very fun. A lot of jumping, a lot of whacking bombs, stuff like that. And there's a lot of enemies there. This was pretty late game, so the enemy density was huge, so naturally that gave me an excuse to use all my guns, and I really enjoyed it. You know what was really weird about this game with the cutscenes? All of the characters looked wooden and fake, almost. It was quite strange. There was barely, like, they had kooky expressions and barely moved. They were just very off-putting. And then some of the other ones, which I was reading, I think some of them were just ripped directly from the movie, perhaps. I mean, those were nice, of course, but any ones that were specific to the game just felt so out of place. Again, the biggest miss in this game was the lack of Ratchet and Clank interactions. It felt more like a 3D platformer that happened to have a Lombax named Ratchet and a faulty Warbot named Clank in it, more than it was actually Ratchet and Clank. Here's my favorite part of the reviews that I do, where I compare them to other games that were released in the same year, and 2016 was explosive with quality games. You've got Overwatch. You've got Dark Souls 3, which is one of my favorites. You have Uncharted 4. You have Inside and Firewatch from the indie development standpoint. You have Titanfall 2, XCOM 2, Doom, Stardew Valley, Oxenfree, a couple of other indie darlings. You have the Witcher DLC. And did I already mention Inside? I think I did. But here's Inside again. It was released in 2016. So it was stacked. It was fucking stacked. As much as I did overall like this Ratchet and Clank game, it doesn't even have a seat at the table, to be honest, amidst all of the other 2016 games. Like, it doesn't break the top 10. I'm sorry, not even. It's on the outside looking way in. After insulting it like that, let me say again, the overall, it was a very enjoyable and charming and worthwhile experience. I'm glad I played it. If you haven't played it, go ahead and check it out. I don't think you'll regret it. The flaws are largely ignorable. They're there, they're present, I witness them, they deter a bit, but the game is what it is. The replayability, which is always important for me, is pretty low for this particular game. I can't see myself revisiting it. I've considered doing the challenge mode, but there's so many other things to play, and I don't think the staying power of this game is strong enough to keep me from playing some other new games that I want to check out. I've rambled in your face enough today, so that I'm going to go ahead and close it out here. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. This is the part of the video where I might tell you who to like and who to subscribe to, but I'm not in the business of telling people what to do. However, if you found your time with me valuable today, please do throw me a like, subscription, and follow me on Twitter. Please do all of those things as it helps me beat the game that is YouTube. All that being said, thanks again. We'll see you next time, and have a good rest of your night. Bye-bye.